It's the 3rd week of May, and I've noticed that my Haskell berries are ripe, or at least what's left of them. Now I don't know if these are falling off when they're ripe. They don't seem to be particularly loose, but there we go. That one's a bit shriveled up actually. I'm just going to go across the plants and pick these. These are 2 different varieties, by the way. I've planted them next to each other because that's necessary for pollination. That one looks like it's a bit damaged actually. I think we'll just leave that on the plant. The birds can have that one. But yeah, there's a few berries down here. Anyway, I'm going to pick these over and then we'll give them a wash, because we're right underneath the rookery here, and there is quite a lot of bird poop on everything here. Yeah, they're just falling off when they're ripe. That's the problem. I've just tried to pick that one and it's fallen to the ground, so I'll see if I can find that. If not, some other animal can have that. But yeah, they seem to have just a tendency to drop off, which is rather unfortunate, because that means we're wasting a lot of them. We've lost a lot of them just to gravity. Never mind, there's a few here to have a little taste. So, going to give these a good wash. They've got this kind of waxy bloom on them, which makes them completely hydrophobic actually, which is interesting. And they do float, so they are quite a lot lighter than water. But anyway, I'm going to give them a swish round in that water, let them soak for a little bit, and then rinse them off. Okay, so berries washed and cleaned. We've got 2 different varieties here, so let's just separate them. There's one that's kind of a longer berry, and there's one that's a rounder, fatter berry. So I'm going to try the round one actually.
Okay.
Jenny, go for it. Let me know what you think.
Almost like blackberry.
Oh yeah, yeah. Quite so sour.
Yeah, quite.
Ish.
Yeah.
They're not terribly sour though, are they?
Yeah.
A little bit astringent. I think they're a little bit like a blueberry. I mean, a lot of people say they are like blueberries. I don't think they've got anything like the aroma of blueberry.
No.
They're just sour, just a little bit acidic, slightly fruity. Which one did you have? The round one?
Yeah.
I'm going to try the long one, because it's a different variety of the same plant. I don't know how different they are.
Slightly different taste actually.
Yeah. That one, I'd say a little bit like a sour grape.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, purple grape.
Hmm. I mean, they're all right, aren't they?
Yeah.
But they're...
Be alright in a mixed fruit salad or
yeah,
something.
you could, yeah, toss them in a fruit salad or in a mixed fruit jam, I suppose, maybe. Try another one. Let's have a little look inside them, actually. It's just, in fact, I'm going to go and get a sharp knife.
They're just pips.
Yeah. So, let's cut one of these in half. That's a good example. And we'll have a look inside. So there we go. Lots of little pips. Green, juicy flesh inside, very thin skin. Some of the colour did come out of the skin onto the knife blade. So, actually that one was really sour. Despite being completely ripe, that was really zingy. They're alright, I don't think they're...
Yeah, they're alright.
Not much to write home about though, really, are they?
Yeah.
The problem with these is they fall off as soon as they're ripe. So there were loads of them on their green, and I've only managed to pick about 8 or 10 of them, and the rest have gone. So I think the birds might have had some, but I think some of them have just fallen to the ground and we've lost them. So that's not great. But yeah, interesting to have tried something different, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
They don't have much. Quiet. Shut your silly beak. Hey. What are you doing? And don't eat the lawn. No. Enough. They don't have much in the way of aroma, do they? They don't have...
No.
You know, whereas a blueberry's got an aroma,
Yeah, aroma.
hasn't it?
Yeah.
Or a
Yeah,
blackberry.
nothing.
These are just a bit sour and fruity. But they're all right. I wonder if actually we had a lot of them and we cooked them. I wonder if that would bring out some flavours. You know, if we were able to make a jam. It might be that they need cooking to actually bring out some
possibly
quality in them.
Have with perhaps ice cream or something.
Yeah, make a little syrup or something. Maybe next year, if we have a larger crop, because the bushes are doing well. Perhaps next year we'll try cooking them with a bit of sugar.
Yeah.
Have it over some ice cream.
Yeah.
Oh, glad to have tried it though. So this Kindle that I made a whole video about previously, I had a bunch of questions from people and also suggestions, and I just want to kind of update on where we're at with this thing now. Now, I was just going to get rid of this and get something else, but I continued tinkering, and here's what's happened. So I've now managed to get it jailbroken and install a few things on it. And actually, it's still usable as an ebook, you know, as an electronic book. It's difficult to connect this now to the Amazon web store because this thing doesn't support two-factor authentication. So actually just registering this on your Amazon account is tricky, but not impossible. However, once you have registered it, if you buy an ebook on Amazon and try and send it to the device, it just never arrives. The device can be online, it can be checking the account. It does connect to the account because when I connected it, it said Atomic Shrimp's Kindle. So it definitely had picked up the account settings, but when it tries to poll the account and download books, they just never arrive. Probably some versioning thing or something like that. Anyway, but you can manually load books on here. And in fact, it's very good at supporting the ebooks you can get, for example, from Project Gutenberg, which is what some of these are. So for example, I can use it for the poems of Thomas Hardy, which are all available on Project Gutenberg. I can use it for, any number of classic books and so on. So we've got Gulliver's Travels there as well. And it's actually really comfortable to read on. It's, was quite a revolutionary thing, the e-ink screen, when it was new. But yeah, it's very comfortable to read on. Very convenient to be able to just turn the page with a button there. What else? I still didn't manage to get Cool Launcher and the terminal things working yet, but I did manage to get Kindle Note working, which is a text editor. This itself was quite a journey, because by default this thing is in Russian language, and I couldn't find the option to change the language, and actually it turns out you just had to press the little button here and pick the language down there along with the text size and so on. So now we've got a text editor, so let's have a new text, a new note. You can do password protected notes as well. We'll call this one test. I keep going to press the button on there, and of course it's not the button because it's not a touch screen. Anyway, so now we've got a text editor. There is no save button on here, it just saves by default. So there we go, got a document editor. And then when you plug this thing into the USB host, these are just text files. However, this has now highlighted what is probably the reason why Amazon didn't provide lots of text entry options for this when this was new. The keyboard's just really not that convenient. So some of this is going to be just the configuration of my hands, but let's just have a look and see what typing is like on this. So if you try to hold the device like this and use this as a kind of two thumbs board, it's actually quite uncomfortable because the device is just top heavy. The screen section is obviously got the glass screen in there. It's slightly heavier than the keyboard section. And so if you try to hold it and use it with two thumbs, granted my thumbs aren't the best thumbs for two thumb typing, but if you try and do that, it's continually trying to overbalance and fall out of your hand. So what about holding it in one hand and doing hunt and peck with the index finger or several fingers of the other hand? Kind of works, but the device is just a little bit too wide. to comfortably hold, well, for me to comfortably hold in one hand. It does work, but you are in danger of accidentally clicking these buttons on the side then. And that leaves you with putting it on a surface and typing with your fingers. And of course you can't type with your full set of fingers because the keyboard is just too tiny, but you can type. Like that. Not very convenient to do that. In fact, the ergonomics are just all wrong here, so you're kind of a bit too much over the top of the keyboard there. The screen is tilted away from you. It would be better if it was like that. So I realise I might sound a bit dissatisfied here, but really I'm not. This thing cost me almost nothing, so there's no actual cause for complaint here. It is a remarkable little device. It's a shame that this form factor of screen with keyboard in a kind of slate format is a better idea in theory than it is in practice. I've seen so many devices targeted for this kind of form factor of a slate with a screen, portrait orientation screen, usually portrait, and a keyboard on the chin. And it seems like it ought to be really good, but in practice it seldom is. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to just talk about was whether I can still use this for recipes. Now, of course, a lot of people did say, yeah, you can still just convert recipes to PDF, put them on here and view them on there. And yes, they're right, but that wasn't what I was hoping to do with this device. What I was hoping for was a device where I could, on a whim, I could just do a web search on here, find a recipe that looks promising, push it through cook.wiki to turn it down into a more compact and text-based recipe, display it on the screen, walk off to the kitchen, cook the recipe. I wanted to be able to use it in that kind of spontaneous fashion rather than finding a recipe, firing up a different computer, converting the recipe, plugging this thing into the computer, transferring it, putting it on here. This would certainly make a really good recipe book because, you could, any of these books, these are just literature, but they could just as well be recipes. It would make a really good recipe book in that sense. But to be honest, if I was going to use it in that way and load recipes in advance rather than spontaneously, it wouldn't need the keyboard at all. So you might just get a regular e-reader that doesn't have a keyboard. You wouldn't need it. Anyway, it's a curious device. It works. I may well keep it just because it's a convenient way of reading free books, such as you might find on Project Gutenberg. A lot of the classics are available there and they format well for this screen. So maybe I will keep this for that purpose now. I don't know. Maybe I'll donate it or something if I get bored and someone else can have a play with it. But anyway, that's where we're at now with this thing. It's not completely useless, but it's not as useful in the specific way I hoped it would be. One of the things I've noticed coming up with some abundance here in the vegetable patch is this plant. This is Papaver somniferum, the opium poppy. Now, a couple of things to say about this. Obviously, this is the poppy from which, this is the species of poppy that is grown for the cultivation of opium and production of heroin and opiate drugs like that, which you might think that means that's illegal to grow, but it's not, because this is also the same species of poppy that is used for the seeds that are put on top of bread. And I got this coming up as weeds in my vegetable patch. Now, it's often said the definition of a weed is just a plant growing in the wrong place. And that is true of these. These are growing in the wrong place. That one, for example, there isn't going to do very well behind this bit of mesh that I've put up for the gourds to grow up. So I'm going to try and move this one. It might be a bit too big to be moved. But there are also a lot of smaller ones here, actually very recognisable just because of their grey glaucous foliage. These, I don't want them to grow here, but I don't mind them growing. So I've been weeding them out and planting them along the back of the courgette patch here, where they won't compete with the courgettes for light, but they will attract pollinators when they flower. So, and maybe I'll even get to harvest some poppy seeds that I can use in the kitchen. So all sorts of good possibilities. Probably not going to harvest my own opium, just before anybody asks. Anyway, so I'm digging these up and moving them. That's not one, that is a weed. That one is groundsel, which is very definitely a weed. It's in the wrong place and I don't really have a right place to move that to, so that one's going to go in the compost bin. So the actual weeds go into here. This is my weed, well, this is my liquid compost bin. So featured in lots of videos before. That is the liquid compost coming out right there. Production is in full swing on this thing now, and it's producing this amazing liquid plant food just from rotting down weeds and other vegetation that I pile in there. Add a little bit of water once in a while. Other weeds we've got here though are this one and this one, which are both species of goosefoot. I think that one might be fat hen. This one might be oak-leafed goosefoot. They are, I didn't plant them here, they are wild plants, but I'm going to let those grow because the leaves are edible. Here's another weed. This is a tomato plant. Growing as a weed, no doubt that survived our garden compost. There's another one just there. In the past I have tolerated these volunteer tomatoes and allowed them to grow on and picked a few fruit off them, but they do tend to be a bit of a vector for blight. They do tend to just encourage blight. There's another thing which might encourage blight. That is a potato. Actually, well, the potato's under the ground there and I've lost track of it, but never mind, if it comes up again I'll get that out. So yeah, tomatoes and potatoes. That potato's probably from a little peeling or something that again escaped composting somehow, made it through the garden compost onto here, but it's fine, we just weed them out. You can also see a sow thistle there. That's a sow thistle, smooth sow thistle. It's been attacked by a leaf miner there. A leaf miner is what's done that pattern of pattern on the leaf there. It's a little insect, the larva of which lives between the top and bottom surfaces of the leaf. That's its entire world, and it's probably pupated in that leaf. I'm going to leave that leaf down there just in case it's still pupating, that insect, but the rest of that can go again into the weed bin. And so all of that stuff in there just goes underneath that weighted piece of plastic on top. Every now and again we give it a little water. This is the stuff that comes out, and it's amazing plant food. So I just decant that into this bottle here, and then I use that to top up. I use like a cupful in each watering can when I'm watering anything that's in active growth. And here's how well it works. I've been watering the rhubarb with it, and look at this rhubarb plant. It's just gone crazy. We haven't put any manure or anything on this rhubarb this year, and it's just gone crazy because I've been watering it with the liquid compost, and it's obviously enjoying it. All 4 of my potatoes are now sprouted, so we've got one there, and those 2 are obvious there. So my 4 seed potatoes that I planted are now showing leaves. When they get a little bit bigger, I'll add some more compost and roll up the sides of these bags. It's interesting, these bags have, how much that's faded in the sunlight already. Not sure these bags are really a great idea, because by the end of the season this plastic's going to be crumbling away to nothing, I should think. Well, we'll see how it goes, but I got a feeling this is really not a great use of plastic. I think a pot might have been better, but still, you don't know until you try. Other weeds include this stinging nettle here. So this is a stinging nettle. Now I'm going to try to demonstrate, instead of going to get gloves, which would be the sensible thing to do, I'm going to try to demonstrate how to pick a nettle without getting stung. So the little stinging hairs or needles are all over the plant. You can't avoid them, but you can, if you grab it quickly like that and decisively, pick it without getting stung. Because a quick grab, a quick decisive grab, crushes those little needles before they can penetrate the skin. So there we go. That's how to pick a stinging nettle without getting stung. I should also say that technique does not always work. So all of these poppies that I transplanted to along this side of the courgettes, they wilted a little bit at first, but they have come back, so that's good. This here, this is a radish. We found this growing in the rockery. I don't know how, but the seed must have survived somehow. And Jenny pulled a weed up, and it had a, you know, proper big red radish on the bottom of the plant. So you don't normally transplant radishes, but I've moved it here, not because I want to eat the radishes, but because I want it to go to seed. I want it to bolt. It looked really sad at first, and all of the leaves collapsed and things have eaten them, but there is new growth. There's new leaves on top there, so that hopefully will bolt. It will produce flowers and seed pods which are edible, and I've decided pretty much that that's the only way that I'm going to bother growing radishes this year, and perhaps in this garden at all, because I don't have a lot of success with growing radishes. They always get eaten by something. But if I grow them and let them go to seed, that's my other set of radishes over there, looking very healthy and good now. Hopefully those will bolt soon, and we'll end up with radish pods, which taste exactly the same as radishes anyway, and you can eat them in salads and things, and you get more of them per plant than you do with radishes. Obviously radishes, you only get one radish per plant, but if you let them go to seed, you get hundreds of seed pods per plant. This is that's that piece of red onion, that little base of red onion that I soaked while we were away in France and then planted out here, and it's sprouted now. It's got some leaves there. It had 3 little growing tips inside the onion, and all 3 of them are sprouted, so that's looking healthy. Quite a few people commented to say that they do this with onions, and then they just leave them growing and cut some green bits of onion when they want green onions for the kitchen. So yeah, that's what we might do. These are the spring onions that I planted, looking pretty good. But yeah, radishes, yeah, I mean, look, I could pull that radish and eat it. I mean, maybe I will, but I think we'll find, that's not bad actually. Maybe I will pull a couple of radishes if they look like they've come to anything, but very often I find that when I try to grow radishes, they go woody or they get eaten by something. This one looks like it might be okay. Maybe we'll give that a taste in a minute. And there's one other thing over here which I initially mistook for these, which are the seed pods from cowslips. So we've got these all over the place. We've got cowslips on the bank here, but I saw these and I just thought that was more cowslip pods, and it isn't though. Well, not all of it. These are cowslip pods. This is yellow rattle. I planted seeds of yellow rattle here last year in the hope that we would get it established on the bank here. We've got one plant there, we've got another one down there, we've got another one over there, and one here, and probably some others as well. In fact, I think I see one coming up over there as well. So yellow rattle is a semi-parasitic plant that parasitizes grasses, and so it grows, it attaches itself to the roots of grasses and drains them of nutrient. It doesn't kill the grasses, but it does weaken them, and so growing yellow rattle here should weaken the grasses a little bit, and that should enable the other flowering plants to thrive a bit more. Not that they necessarily need it, actually. The species diversity is already quite good in this little bank here, but with the help of that yellow rattle suppressing the grasses, hopefully we'll get a little bit more chance for more species diversity of other plants. So I've given that a wash and cut the root off the bottom. This will be my first taste of a homegrown radish for, I don't know, quite a few years actually. I haven't really grown them for radishes. You can see actually this one has had, something's taken a munch out of that, probably a slug or a snail has taken a bite out of there, but it'll be fine. Let's give it a taste. Well, I expected it to be a bit more fiery than that. Often the white radishes are really peppery. This one's just not. Kind of ever so slightly disappointingly mild. Never mind. Anyway, as I say, yeah, we're growing most of the plants up there in order to let them go to seed so that we can eat the pods. Can you guess where we are? We're at Chesil Beach, but can you guess where we are? So, Abbotsbury. I mean, I already know it's Abbotsbury because we've just parked here, but this is Abbotsbury gravel. We just decided to come down here and have a little picnic tea and take the doggo for a walk, just sit and have a bit of sea air with our sandwiches. It's a bit breezy. There's quite a surf, lots of people fishing, as always. I think we're just going to walk a little bit towards Burton Bradstock, maybe find a slightly sheltered place to sit down, maybe on the lee side of the Chesil Bank, and enjoy our picnic. Eva. Too big? Right, I can see some beautiful purple flowers over here, which I'm just going to go and investigate, because I think that's mallow, either tree mallow or common mallow. Yep, so this is mallow. Look, there's also sky onions developing. This puzzled me last time we were here. This plant here, it's clearly an allium, but it looks a lot like crow garlic, but it's too big. And this is Babington's leek. This is the ancestor of cultivated leeks. In fact, you can see this is all over the place. There's tons of it down here. Now, I'm not going to pick any of that today, but I am going to get here later in the year, I think, and pick some of the aerial bulbils off of this and grow it at home. That is introducing a wild allium to my garden, which is a thing I thought I would never do. But this one, like I say, it's the ancestor of cultivated leeks, and so I think it's a bit better behaved than some of the other wild alliums. Here's the thing we haven't talked about before. This is sea poppy. That's the seed pod there. That's a flower bud, and these beautiful yellow poppy flowers and glaucous succulent leaves, adapted to this environment where fresh water is in scarce supply. There's another one, sea poppy, and I think that's another one there, but not in flower. So another plant with a similar adaptation to the marine environment, in fact a lot of them, So this is sea kale, Cranberry maritima, and it's got these, again, succulent glaucous leaves with a waxy covering to prevent them from drying out and to conserve the water supply of the plant. So here the sea kale is in flower. I'm not sure we've seen this before on a video, so anyway, let's have a closer look at that, because if we look at these flowers, you can see they got 4 petals, because this is in the cabbage and mustard family. So yeah, I don't think we've been here to see it flower before, and I'm guessing that these flowers are probably going to have a scent to them. A little bit of a musky scent. It might well be that these flowers become scented in the evening, because white flowers are often scented to attract moths after dark. But you can see its relationship to cabbage, can't you? And broccoli, and you know, purple sprouting broccoli. It's not quite the same thing as cultivated cabbage, not the same species, but closely related. So here we've got, well, what is probably sometimes a little watercourse, as I can see rushes over there. Don't know that there's any water flowing in it today. No, but you can see there must have been some runoff that's come and carved a great deep channel through the Chesil gravel, exposing the clay underlayer. Let's see what we got growing here. So we've got sea beet, obviously, really common thing to find on the beach. One of my favorite wild vegetables. These spearhead shaped leaves are like just a better version of spinach. I have a feeling this might be wild parsnip here, or something in the carrot family anyway. We've got bird's foot trefoil, and this I think is probably wild carrot. It might not be, it might be a chamomile. Actually, the carrot family and the daisy family do some quite similar things sometimes. They have some quite similar adaptations sometimes. These bushes are a plant called tamarisk, which is got some flowers on it. Let's have a look at the flowers. With these little spikes of tiny pale pink flowers. So that's tamarisk, common tamarisk, I think. We've got a sea campion here. This is, all the flowers are over, but this is a member of the carnation family, and it has, again, glaucous blue-grey leaves. Here's another. This is related to sea beet. This is saltbush, so related to sea beet and goosefoot and spinach and all of those sorts of things. And that one's edible. Thrift. And again, the glaucous blue-grey leaves that are an adaptation to this environment. You can get a better look at Babington's leek. So there's a specimen that hasn't actually flowered this year, and that's just a leek really. They're very wind burnt because of where they're growing. But even the stems and leaves of these are slightly glaucous. I think glaucous is our word of the day today. Oh, look, on this sea kale, there's the seed pods starting to develop. These eventually, when they ripen, become very lightweight but waterproof, and so they fall off, get blown around, perhaps carried along in the waves, and then washed ashore on some other beach where they could grow. But yeah, here we are. This is a little clump of Babington's leek here. Yeah, I'm thinking about bringing this one back to the garden. But given my past experience of three-cornered leek in the garden, I'm still a little bit trepidatious about that. So try and talk me out of that in the comments. Here we've got burnet moths. Striking coloration, these almost metallic blue-black wings with bright crimson spots on them. And there's another one there. This is a 6-spot burnet, I think. There are various different species of burnet moths identified by the number of spots they have on their wings. There's another one here. Let's just see if we can see it. And so those are probably females. And what they do is they climb up a piece of vegetation, wave their butt around in the air, and release pheromones. And then the males fly upwind on the trail of the pheromones to mate with them. Here's an interesting plant we probably don't talk about very often. This is wild carrot, or Queen Anne's lace. Now, this is probably the most misidentified, or hopefully identified, plant on the internet. It seems like every other day there's somebody on the internet saying, is this wild carrot or is it hemlock? As if those are the only two choices. This is wild carrot, Queen Anne's lace. It wouldn't be worth trying to dig this up and eat the roots on this, because they're probably awfully fibrous and tough, and probably bitter actually, because whilst this is the ancestor of cultivated carrots, it isn't anywhere close to like a cultivated carrot. I think people eat the flowers actually, and possibly the flowers might be the best part of this, I'm not sure. But anyway, this is definitely wild carrot. A couple of key identifying factors for that. One is that all of the stems are really hairy. You don't get that with hemlock, although you do with some of the other carrot family plants. One thing that's particularly distinctive of this particular species, wild carrot, is underneath the umbel here there's a bract. There's a kind of basket of bracts, and you don't get that. And actually, when you look at the individual little collections of flowers, there's another little basket underneath that as well. These bract baskets are a distinguishing factor for this plant. Some little beetles on the flowers there, little pollen beetles of some sort. But yeah, it's really weird that the internet seems to ask the question, is this hemlock or wild carrot, as if that's a binary choice. It really isn't. The carrot family has about 4,000 species in it, and many of them are poisonous and quite a few of them are edible. And it isn't really a question of is this wild carrot or hemlock, because there are many other choices. Plus also there are some things that are not even in the carrot family that look a little bit like they are in the carrot family. One example would be yarrow. Looks like a umbellifer. It looks like a member of the Apiaceae, and it's not. It's a daisy. Not an elaborate picnic. I've got ham, cheese and salami sandwiches with mustard and some crisps. Crisps called shing-a-ling, and some fruit and vegetables. In case you're wondering what shing-a-ling by Chick Boy are like, they're these hollow wheat, crunchy, slightly spicy chips. So we're not out for a long walk today. I think we'll probably go as far as that pillbox there and turn round. I'll be quiet. But just, I don't know, what are we, a mile from Abbotsbury, the gravel is noticeably smaller, but who's measuring? So we will, if we can, have a look inside this pillbox. I don't think there'll be much to see. And actually it may not be very pleasant to go in there. Sometimes these things end up getting used as a latrine. So the entrance is around the back here. Okay. Oh, it's just full of mud and sediment. It's fairly clean other than that. There we go. Just a concrete pillbox full of clay and gravel. But otherwise, in fairly decent nick. Although, looks like it might have shifted a little bit since it was originally built. So they built these things on like a concrete raft because there's no bedrock here. It's just gravel and then clay below that. It's a long way down before you hit anything that's actually you'd recognise as rock. Right, so we're going to cross over the bank now and head back on the leeward side on the little track that's on the back of Chesil Bank. So yeah, I quite like this walk because walking on the gravel is exhausting, and so you can walk as far as you really feel you can on the loose gravel and then back on this road. It is actually a road and cars do occasionally come along here, but not very often. So here's an interesting thing about these Babington's leeks, and this is a thing that most of the alliums that produce aerial bulbils will do this. But so there are the aerial bulbils in there, but also some of them are already producing their own little stems and their own little flowers. So yeah, so you've got a cluster of flowers, you've got the little bulbils in amongst them, and then some of those bulbils can actually grow leaves and flowers while they're still on the flower head. This is interesting. This plant does not belong here. This rather sort of willowy looking, slightly thorny plant here, there's one of the flowers. Now they're not exactly characteristic of the family, but you can just about see that bears a resemblance to a flower of bittersweet. And this is in the potato family. This is a nightshade, and in fact this is goji berries. So this doesn't belong here. This is not native. I'm guessing that somebody must have had a trail mix that had some goji berries in it, and maybe they spat one out or dropped one or something, and this has just decided to grow here. So these little nightshade flowers will be followed by red berries that are goji berries, and or wolf berries I think is another name for them, and edible once they're overripe and or dried. So other interesting things about these Babington's leek. So that one's there has got aerial bulbils. This one, well, not so much. I think there are some in there. So it's very variable. Some of these plants have the aerial bulbils, other ones just produce flowers. Some produce no flowers at all, just a cluster of bulbils at the top of the stem where the flowers would be. And I think probably the last little fact for the day for Babington's leek is these bulbils, well, the plant in general has contractile roots, which means that when these bulbils fall off at the end of the year, which they will, so these stems will die, the bulbils will ripen and fall to the ground. They grow roots down into the ground, and then the roots go and pull the plant down into the ground. So they plant themselves using contractile roots. It's quite impressive. Some of these are taller than I am. Quite an impressive display of alliums. I hope you'll agree. So we could, if we wanted some onion flavour in something, we could pick the leaves, but the leaves are a bit rough and tough, really. I think earlier in the year you could probably cut them and use them a little bit like spring onions or small leeks. But it is the ancestor of our cultivated leek, or one of them. I didn't know any of this when I came here last time and saw all of these things and was kind of wondering what they were. So A few people helped me in the comments, thank you for that. And I went off and researched, and I know a lot more about Babington leek than I ever did. In fact, it was a completely overlooked allium. I thought I knew all of the alliums that we had wild in this country, and I was neglecting to think of the leeks. So here's a case in point about the, is it hemlock or is it wild carrot? Here's a plant. Is this hemlock or is it wild carrot? It's neither. It's hemlock water dropwort, but it's not the same as hemlock proper. This is a poisonous member of the carrot family. You would die if you ate this. And here's another one. So this is a member of the carrot family. Is this hemlock or is it wild carrot? It's neither. This is hogweed. And this one's edible. Not to be confused with giant hogweed, which is not edible because it's phototoxic. The giant hogweed, which is not this species, you get that on your skin, it causes extreme sensitivity to sunlight, which can result in really nasty blistering. But that is not giant hogweed, that's just regular old hogweed, or cow parsnip, and it's edible. Here's another member of the carrot family. So we're too late to see the flowers, but you can hopefully see from the seed-bearing structures here that it's a member of the same family. It has these umbels of, well, what was originally flowers. These are now seed pods. Is this hemlock or is it wild carrot? It's neither. This is Alexander's, and this one's edible. So I think the seeds are sometimes called black coriander. They've got a spiciness to them, but they're also really rather bitter. The best part of this plant is the unopened flower buds and the young stems. Oh, this is interesting. There's a different allium down here. This is Allium roseum. Again, it has these aerial bulbils, but this is not, well, you can just tell from the size that this is not one of those Babington's leeks. This is Allium roseum, rosy flowered garlic. Surprised there's only one of them actually, because usually you find a whole load. Oh, there's another one. There we go. And these are the sky onions. Well, that's what I call them anyway. Yeah, there's some more there. Quite a common roadside weed, this one, in Dorset. Escaped from gardens. It's not native to this land, but it's a fairly well behaved naturalized plant. Can be a little bit troublesome in gardens, especially if you've got a sunny aspect. It really likes the sunshine. My grandmother's old garden in Norfolk was overrun with the stuff, but apart from that, it's not as bad as three-cornered leek. It doesn't really want to be the only plant in existence. So here's what I wanted to show you. Here is another really similar looking plant. Look, umbels of white flowers, frilly sort of feathery leaves. Is this wild carrot or is it hemlock? It's neither, and it's not even in the same family. This is yarrow. This is a daisy family plant, but look at it. It looks so much like a carrot family or carrot relative. It's got these umbels of little flowers, but when you look very closely, which we'll get a still photo of in a moment, those are little daisies. And the feathery leaves aren't quite pinnate in the same way that carrot family leaves are pinnate. These are more like little brushes. I think there are some form of pinnate, but they are more fluffy or feathery than carrot family. But this just goes to show you that not everything that looks like this is the same thing. So I hope that aptly illustrates the point. You can't just look at a plant that has these flattish white flower heads and ask, is it wild carrot or hemlock? It's not as simple as that. This, by the way, is wild carrot, but you can't just ask, is it one or the other, because there are, like I say, nearly 4,000 species of carrot family relatives, and some of them are really nasty and some of them are quite benign. I honestly actually don't really know why people get so excited about finding wild carrots. Do people get that excited about eating carrots from the supermarket? What's the deal there? We spend a lot of time in the garden doing things for a purpose, but perhaps not enough time just wandering around the garden looking at things and saying, aren't they pretty? I mean, starting with this one. Eva, Eva. Isn't she pretty? You good girl. So Jenny's hanging basket, she's got these candy striped verbena in there. Aren't they pretty? Geraniums, or actually pelargoniums, although there is actually also a geranium in there. I think it's just a cranesbill, but aren't they pretty? And irises in the tiny pond we have here. They are the best colour. And Sweet Williams. You alright there? Okay. Sweet Williams, same family as the red campion, so the carnation family. And again, like some of the red campion, these are a shade of pink that the camera can't possibly properly represent for you. So these, especially here, these are such a deep shade of pink. Oh look, we've got a little bee. Is it a bee fly maybe? I think it might be a bee fly. Not sure, but anyway, happy little pollinator. The flowers of the chives, which have recovered rather well from their brutal cutting earlier in the year. But aren't chives flowers really pretty? Little purple pom-poms. And columbine, Aquilegia. We didn't plant this. This is just an accidental seedling. This is a lovely pale pink one. But we've also got, it's over now. We had a kind of maroon purple one here. It's finished flowering. It's just a few petals hanging on. And we've got others of those throughout the garden that have just self-seeded. And they're doing okay. Borage with its pretty blue-purple flowers. One of them's fallen off here, so sometimes people I think like to put these inside ice cubes and put them in drinks. It's edible. That's why it's here in the herb patch. Tradescantia, again the best colour. 3-petaled flowers that come out, and each individual flower only lasts a day, but there's a succession of them over time. More Sweet Williams here, and again really pretty, very deep raspberry purple shades here. And like I say, I know for a fact the camera is not showing you the true colour of this. It is so purple pink it hurts to look at it. California poppies in 2 different colours. So this is the classic California poppy colour, the bright orange, but this is also a California poppy here. It's got these kind of raspberry ripple colours on the petals. Very nice. More Sweet Williams. Foxgloves, always a nice treat. I love watching the bees in these foxgloves. The bees will go in, and you see them going in one flower after another all the way up the stack. A really dark Aquilegia over there. Look at this one. Dark purple Aquilegia. That's the one that we found growing self-seeded in the vegetable patch upstairs last year, and so we transplanted it down here. And isn't it magnificent? And up here in the vegetable patch, something actually, this is the reason I'm recording this today, because my peas have started flowering. Now peas normally just have white petals, but have a look at these. These are the dark purple mange tout peas, and the flowers are kind of pink and, well, pale pink and dark pink. Aren't they pretty? And I suppose also this is the pak choi, the last one, we haven't picked this yet, which has bolted and gone to seed and produced these rather cheerful yellow flowers. These are all edible. This won't go to waste. And the courgette flowers. The courgette is flowering now. And again, it has these, I would observe this in previous years, these retro-reflective petals that when you get the light behind you, the flower suddenly looks brighter. So that's just some of the things in the garden. I mean, these hawkbit flowers here are also rather lovely. And these attract all sorts of bees and small pollinators, and you know, there's one there, look, a little bumblebee. And this is a good reason to just tolerate a few weeds in the garden. They're not weeds, actually, they're wildflowers. But that's a good reason to tolerate a few so-called weeds in the garden, because these little bees that are coming here to pollinate these flowers, well, it's just good for nature anyway to have all of these invertebrates, all of these insects buzzing around. It's food for other things apart from anything else, but also these pollinators will on a different day fly off and pollinate my peas and my beans. On our way home from Newlyn, we've just stopped off at Looe in Cornwall. Before we leave Cornwall, there's something I want to do. So, cream teas in Cornwall are different to cream teas in Devon. In Devon, the tradition is to put the clotted cream on the scone and then have the jam on top. Yeah, thanks.
Do you want another Cornish way?
Yeah, the jam first, isn't it?
Jam
Yeah, jam first, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's what we're here for. So as I've just been admonished by the staff, the Cornish way is jam first. And that's not how we normally do it. But we're here in Cornwall, so we're going to do it the Cornish way. I think sometimes they have butter, then jam, then cream. But anyway, not this one or that one. Oh, bro, that's a snappy thing. Jam first, because we're in Cornwall. Clotted cream. And there we go. They're really good scones. These are clearly very fresh scones, freshly made today. Wow. So here's the thing. Which way's right, which way's wrong? Up to you. But scones and cream and jam, you can't really go wrong. No dogs on the beach at any time, I'm afraid. I know. It looks like the best digging beach as well. I'm not going off the edge. Okay, question for structural engineers here. What's the purpose of the wooden wedges here? There are wooden wedges driven into all of the rocks here. Now I know what a wedge is for. Are these wedges... They seem to be stopping the rocks from rattling or something, and when the waves hit them, does that make the whole structure stronger? They're all the way along. And obviously wood is not as durable a material as stone in this context. But yeah, what are these wedges for? Is it just to stabilise the rocks and stop them from any small movements, which would then become large movements? Is there a purpose? They're all the way along here, so I assume they are something official or useful. Or are these wooden wedges here as kind of steps for people to be able to climb down or up? Who knows? Let me know if you know what the wedges are for. It's time for the comment positivity section. This is just like the antithesis of responding to hater comments. Let us begin. This was on my elderflower clafouti-esque thing. Came out looking a little porous, so I'm thinking why not turn it into a soak? Maybe an elderflower, raspberry and ginger simple syrup, poke holes in the top and soak it. Yeah, that experimental cake tart flan thing definitely needed one more flavour. And I think it probably could have benefited from a bit of moisture. So I think, yeah, making a syrup and soaking it would actually be a really good way to do that. A slightly acidic, perhaps, syrup. So yeah, elderflower, raspberry and ginger. Sounds good. I did think maybe a little bit of brandy or something in there as well. A little bit of booze in there might make that extra special. Someone else said, I'm thinking lemon balm syrup drizzle. Pretty seasonal and local. Instead of from Spain or whatever, you get it mixed with elderflower sometimes. Lemon balm. Yeah, I think lemon balm would be nice. Someone else said I made a cordial from the berries, but it needed boatloads of lemon and sugar to be palatable. I'm told it's more medicinal than for pleasure. Maybe it would make a good wine. So this is about elderberries. So elderberries don't have a very strong fruity flavour of their own. They've got a wonderful colour, and they have been used to make wine. In fact, they've been used to adulterate wine in history. But the elderberries do make a good wine. Actually, I've had a red wine made from elderberries that was a very good wine. I'm not a wine connoisseur, but it was to my palate a wine that was every bit as good as a good red wine made from grapes. I found that elderberries really work well when they're used in conjunction with something else. A couple of years ago I made something I called purple jam, which was just from hedgerows. So it was blackberries, elderberries and damsons from the local hedgerows here. And it was fantastic. And the elderberries definitely added something. They added a richness and definitely some purple colour, obviously. But they added a kind of a background, just richness and body. Really, I appreciate those aren't particularly useful descriptive terms, but adding elderberries to a blackberry and damson jam definitely enhanced it in a way that you wouldn't get from just using elderberries and blackberries on their own in any combination. So they're really good in combination, is what I'm saying about elderberries. On the Cornish pasty video, next up, a trip to Melton Mowbray. Now, Melton Mowbray is a town in the Midlands, I think, famous for its style of pork pies. So that is an interesting one. I do like Melton Mowbray pork pies. But yeah, maybe a trip to Melton Mowbray and we'll try and make a pork pie there. Or maybe I'll go to Bakewell and make a Bakewell pudding. Again, a town famous for the thing named after it. Most people know that as Bakewell tart, actually, which is a pastry tart filled with a kind of almond paste and jam and iced with glacé icing. Bakewell pudding uses some of the same ingredients, but is a different thing. And I think it's a point of annoyance for the locals, actually, that Bakewell tart is the famous thing and Bakewell pudding is the local and cherished thing. I have a feeling, though, also that there's a local dispute about what is the authentic Bakewell pudding. So that might be an interesting thing to explore sometime. So perhaps we'll make a trip to Bakewell and try and investigate the Bakewell pudding. Next one, a question about the community, the atomic shrimp community. What would us followers be called? Nuclear prawns, perhaps? Like Escape to River Cottage 25 years ago. Would love a TV programme, something like Shrimp HQ. Sure you would attract even more viewers. The knowledge you have on numerous topics is impressive. Thank you. I really don't want to go on TV. I suppose some people will be watching this on their TV, and this is kind of TV, but I'm not sure I want an actual broadcast TV show. But the question, what would us followers be called? Well, I've always thought of us as the Crustacean Nation. This video, and I can't remember what this, I haven't got on my paper what this video was on. This video reminds me of why I love this community and how this channel helped me get through the hardest December of my life last year. Thank you. Well, that's really heartening to hear, and thank you for your kind feedback. I get a lot of comments like this about people saying that my content helped them to feel calm in the midst of turmoil or just help them through a difficult patch, and I really, really appreciate that. I should say this is not therapy. I'm not any kind of qualified therapist or anything like that, so don't use my videos as an alternative to seeking professional help. I'm really, really pleased and glad that it does help in any way. It does help, but do seek professional assistance and guidance and therapy if you need it, as well as watching my videos, obviously. This is a comment about the Amazon Kindle thing that I tried to use in a particular way. So somebody said, I would have liked it if there was some way to quickly send any block of text I was seeing on my phone, like a news article, tutorial, product manual, anything I would want to leave open and glance back at in the middle of a project, and send it to the Kindle. I have the exact same one. Maybe some companion third-party app or plug-in to share a URL and make it pop up, like as if we were Chromecasting text. Probably not possible, though. And I think that would be pretty much what I wanted, to be able to kind of spontaneously find something on the web and then put it on an e-ink screen so that I can carry that e-ink screen somewhere and use it and not have to worry about the thing powering off. I realise, obviously, that there are lots of ways to do that involving another computer. So I can go and format documents and put them on the Kindle and use it that way. But what I was really wanting to try to find was some way of doing that spontaneously. So I'd be browsing the web on my phone. I'd say, oh, well, there's an interesting recipe. I'm going to try that right now. Send it to the Kindle, or even browse on the Kindle, because it did have a kind of rudimentary browser. But yeah, the idea would be to then condense that down into a easily digested single page of text or 2 pages of text, display it on the Kindle, off to the kitchen, where we don't have to worry about the screen turning off or the battery running down while we test out a recipe. Like I say, lots of kind of longhand ways of doing that, but my hope was to be able to do it a little bit more organically and spontaneously than that. I think probably in the long run, I am in the market for an e-reader that is based on Android. So you can get them. You can get e-ink tablets that are based on Android, and then they would have a proper browser. And yeah, you'd be able to use them in the way that I envisage, which is browsing recipe websites, putting it through cooked.wiki. If you don't know about cooked.wiki, it's a website where you can take one of those, those really long bloggy recipe pages where you can't even find the recipe on the page because it witters on about some backstory, or actually the recipe is broken up and distributed through the page, and it's difficult to follow. If you take a recipe web page and you prefix the URL with cook.wiki/ the recipe URL, it will condense that page and it'll give you a recipe based on that page that's just readable and typically just one page. I find it very useful for just extracting meaning out of those very long and rambling bloggy recipe pages. Often those pages are formatted the way they are because they want to present you with lots of adverts, so they have to make you scroll and scroll and scroll and go to the next page and so on. So it might be, as I say, that I'm in the market really for an Android tablet that happens to have an e-ink screen that I can use then for that kind of recipe exploration and testing. Next one sounds like a negative comment, but it isn't. This is an interesting little rabbit hole. Can't think why my harmless comment was deleted. Now, it's possible, sometimes people ask that question and their comment kind of wasn't harmless. It's just that they think that their views are normal and they're not. I don't think this was necessarily that, because here's another question that actually opened up the rabbit hole. Somebody asked, how are you driving to Hawaii or really even Alaska? And I asked on this one, I said, sorry, what? This was a video not remotely about visiting every US state by car or something. I've never published any such video. This was a comment on something completely unrelated. So I asked about that. And I've always assumed that these kind of irrelevant comments are either just mistakes, or sometimes maybe somebody's watching a video, they got to nearly the end of that video and they decide to leave a comment. So they scroll down, maybe they get reading the comments. By the time they scroll back up and click in the comment box, perhaps the video has just clicked over and auto-played the next video in the playlist or in their recommended feed or something like that. And so I've often assumed that these stray irrelevant comments are just those kind of mistakes. But this one in particular I asked, and they said no, they paused the video and commented and so on. And it turns out that YouTube's got a bug that they still haven't fixed, where comments were going missing. And people thought that their comments are being deleted or just going missing. But what was actually happening is you'd comment on a video and your comment would just get attached to a different video that you perhaps hadn't even seen, or maybe one that you had watched, but it wasn't the video you were trying to comment on. So yeah, there's a bug in YouTube. Annoyingly, they reported that this is fixed, but I am still seeing those comments where they look like earnest, helpful, interesting, relevant questions. They're not spam, they're not bots, but they're just not relevant to the video that they appear on. So YouTube thinks they fixed this bug. I don't think they have. So yeah, if your comment went missing and it wasn't the kind of comment that anyone would find controversial or divisive, then the chances are something went wrong with the system and your comment is probably attached to the wrong video on YouTube. Hopefully they'll get it fixed soon. This was on the nettles video. Somebody said, I would imagine aphids contain a fair amount of sugar, so it might be as well to leave them on. So aphids, little insects that live on the sap of plants, and weird little things, they have to drink more sap than they need, because aphids live entirely by sucking the sap of plants. But in order to live, they need minerals. They need things that aren't just sugar water. So they need minerals and a bit of protein and things, and those things are quite scarce in the sap of plants. And so aphids actually have to drink way more sap out of the plant than they need for the energy from the sugar in it. And so aphids actually excrete this substance, which is very pleasantly named honeydew, but it's actually aphid excretions, and it's mostly sugar water, because they're throwing away the sugar and the water because they need to extract the protein and the minerals from the sap. As a result, anyway, I imagine aphids are pretty well full of sugar. So my answer to this is and this is true, I have occasionally wondered if you could make jam from aphids. I mean, people eat insects all over the world. We're one of the cultures that actually probably doesn't eat insects all that much, or not overtly, although things like red food colouring is typically insect-based. But yeah, I occasionally wondered when I see a plant absolutely encrusted with fat, juicy aphids, whether you could just shake the aphids off and collect enough of them and commit aphid genocide. Boil them up with a bit more sugar and make aphid jam. I think this might be an idea that remains on my ideas list forever and never actually makes it to reality. Also on the stinging nettles video, did you know if you take the stalk of a dandelion and split it open, then all that white sticky stuff inside will neutralise the pain and burn from being stung by the nettles? Grew up in the forest and used to get stung a lot. Interesting, that one. I'll have to try that sometime. I think sometime I might actually collect up all of these nettle sting remedy suggestions and objectively test them. Go and sting myself with some nettles on my forearm or something like that. I don't suffer very badly with it, so that won't do me any permanent damage. And then try the natural remedies. Try all these different natural remedies and see which one works the best. When I was growing up, it was always dock leaves. People said, oh, if you get stung by a nettle, go and find a dock leaf and rub a dock leaf on it. I have a feeling that apart from the fact that dock leaves, when they're crushed, are quite moist and they're cool and damp, and I think slightly acidic, I think apart from that, there is no power in dock leaves to neutralise nettle stings. I think it is just that they are a little bit soothing. I think plantain is another one. I think sometimes people have used the mucilaginous sap from those leaves and rubbed that on nettle stings as well, and it might have a soothing effect. I do also think that perhaps some of the time when we were kids, go and find a dock leaf was just a way of distracting us from the fact that we'd been stung by nettles. It was, we went to mum or dad saying, oh, I stung by my plant bit me. And so the parents would say, oh yeah, now go and find a dock leaf and rub a dock leaf on it and you'll be okay. And apart from the placebo effect of the parents said, if you do this, this will be okay, and you believe it, so it does kind of work. Apart from the placebo effect, there is also the distraction effect, where the act of going to find a dock leaf distracts you from the pain of being stung by nettles. So I think that might have been a significant part of it. That's just my own hypothesis. Anyway, yeah, I might try that sometime, so thank you for the suggestion. Oh, corrections time, actually. So kindly corrections. Hey Mike, just a small correction. When you were at Utah Beach, it was the Americans, the Brits and the Canadians who stormed the beaches June 6, 1944. The Canadians took Juno Beach. I am so sorry for not mentioning the part the Canadians played in the storming of the Normandy beaches on D-Day. In my defence, I was quite overwhelmed by the feels that I had when I was there, but it was not my intention to sideline anybody's nation who played a part in that liberation of Europe. Again, my profound gratitude to all of those brave people who stormed the beaches of Normandy and took part in that D-Day invasion and the campaign that followed. Another correction, pré is also French for field or pasture. Now, there was this thing when we were trying the lamb from the salt marshes. The lamb is sometimes called pre-salted lamb. And this is one of these false friends or something like that, where you see a phrase in a foreign language and it looks like something that makes sense to you in your own language. And so the term for this lamb, this salt marsh lamb in France is, and pardon my pronunciation, agneau de pré salé. It looks like it's talking about pre-salted lamb, but actually pré, it means a meadow or a field or a pasture. And salé, obviously, is salted, so it's the pasture that's salted. So it's lamb from salted pastures. So yeah, it's not the lamb that's pre-salted, and actually it would probably be pretty bad for the sheep if their metabolism was polluted by lots of salt in their system. It would be probably fatal for them. Salt is actually quite a dangerous thing for mammals to have too much of in their body. So yeah, it's not that the lamb is pre-salted, it's that the lamb is grazed on salted pastures. Thank you for that correction. It's something that escaped me when I was there. So I'm grateful. But yeah, the lamb from those pastures, there is something very special about the character of the meat. It's really hard to describe why it was so good, but it was some of the most flavorful and tender and interesting lamb I've ever eaten. And now to finish us off, I think a new subsection of Comment Positivity, which is for puns and dad jokes. Now, I am quite a fan of the old dad jokes and puns. And so here are a couple that made me chuckle. On the elderflower clafouti tart thing, somebody said, outflandish. But the prize this time round goes to somebody who commented on the Cornish pasties video. So just to recap, we travelled to Cornwall and stayed there for a couple of days in Newlyn, baked Cornish pasties in Cornwall, one of the reasons for going there, carried our pasties around the bay through Newlyn, through Penzance to Marazion, and ate them on the beach at Marazion in sight of St Michael's Mount. So that being the background story, here's the comment. Those pasties look great. I bet you could have sold them to the locals. But you'd need to know the pie rates of Penzance. Oh, so that one wins the Dad Joke Award for this video. And that's all I have for you today, so thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.